Let's catch up with Jamie McLennan of the Overdrive crew. Noodles, thanks so much for doing this. It's great to have you back on Winnipeg Sports Talk. I would love to be talking about a big Jets win last night, but got a little rocky for the club lately. I mean, listen, you look at the standings, they're still 2 points out of first place. They've earned themselves a pretty lofty spot in the Central and the West. But to use an Overdrive term, the level of concern around Winnipeg has been growing. What do you make of where the Jets are at in a pretty ugly game on home ice last night?
Yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, shots on goal and chances and all of that type of stuff. If I wanted to be negative, I'm not going to be. But if I wanted to be negative, that looked a lot like a Jets team last year. You know, just kind of getting outshot and kind of, going through the motions and not engaged in areas that you needed to be engaged in. But that being said, and I said this to you before we came on, I think the team has earned the right for a little bit of a bump in the road here. They've worked really hard. They've played with structure. They played with emotion. Their top players have played fantastic. And, they've kind of hit the ditch recently. So I do want to give them a pass because, as you laid out, you're looking really good in the Central. You have earned that type of cushion where if you do have an off, 5-6 games, and that's kind of what we're seeing. We haven't seen them at the top of their game here in the last 10 days or so. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt because they are a different team than last season. And also, I'll add one more thing. I know I'm quite long-winded on this. Buffalo's played really well. Like, Buffalo is a serious team, and I think they've turned the corner with some of their young players. Like Olofsson kind of hides in the weeds. He's a really good player. I think Tage Thompson and Alex Tuck, that's a two-headed monster that are big, strong players, tough to deal with. And, they're well-rounded. And that defense, of course, 22 and under, there's 4 of them. And we saw Owen Power, score that goal. You start to see him settle in a little bit. So I think it was a little bit of both. Buffalo's played really well. And Winnipeg hasn't played well enough, or they've set the bar really high. They've got to get back to that bar, and they haven't been there in the last 10 days.
Noodles, we in the media often try and psychoanalyze where teams are. You've been in these rooms before. I mean, you know what it's like to play the long grind of an NHL season.
Yeah.
I do wonder the unique challenges of getting home after the longest road trip of the year with 3 games against non-playoff teams before you get an 11-day break. What sort of a challenge is that for the coaching staff to try and get your guys locked in when, human nature would be that maybe you're looking ahead a little bit?
That's where I was going to go. Human nature is big on this because let's not forget you've got young guys that are probably looking ahead to this break and going, and I'm going to say this respectfully, you got your goon buddies back home going, waiting for you to come home, and we're going to have some drinks. We're going to have some fun. We're going to, and this team has earned it. I'll come back to it. They've earned a mental and physical break. So that's what's key here too, is they've got an opportunity. You're right. You're looking at the quality of competition going, that should be a win, coulda, woulda, all of that type of stuff. So they've got to find a way to lock it in mentally before you do get that well-earned break. And that's easier said than done because you just mentioned it. It's the human side. You get distracted. You get excited that right around the corner is a little break. You get an opportunity to spend some time with family and friends and maybe, fire off to Vegas or fire off to a warm climate where you can, put your feet up and let the body and mind heal a little bit for a couple of days. So, I would say that throughout the league, you could see maybe you've had some distracted games here. And we even saw it last night. I mean, honestly, Colorado loses to Arizona. Buffalo beats Winnipeg. These are top tier teams that, maybe took their foot off the gas and been looking at the schedule. And they've got to find a way to keep it focused before you do get into the break.
Well, and Bones had said yesterday, and I hadn't heard this before. I mean, they're coming off the road, and he said he got the players in early yesterday morning it almost seemed like his spidey senses were tingling, and he wanted to make sure he could do everything to do it. And, we talk about looking ahead, but this was the first game back. And I don't know why this has been the case. Maybe you can enlighten us how a team goes on a long road trip, comes back at home in their first game, and certainly last night, that was a team that, it seemed like it was running on fumes, but it was also emotionally flat.
Yeah. And I don't have the formula of why When you come off a long road trip of that first game, it's just you're out to lunch mentally and physically, because I've gone through it and I've been that distracted athlete. You come home, it's almost like, okay, home cooking. You've got a bunch of things that have been kind of waiting for you. If you have a spouse or a girlfriend or a significant other, you probably got to put some time in, or excited to put some time in there. To me, you've got visitors or family members that come in. It's almost like, okay, we've been out on the road. It's been a grind. You get home and it's almost like that collective like breath. And you're like, okay, I'm home. We can still play, but I got to take care of this. I got to take care of that. So I don't have the formula. I don't have the answer on that, but you see it not just with Winnipeg. You see it throughout the league. And you're right. Bones has been around so much. It's almost second nature. His spidey sense goes up and goes, hey, I think we're in one with the guys. Let's try and do something different to get them focused. And I think they gave it their all last night, but they just looked like they were kind of a step behind and a little bit on fumes.
Noodles, I mean, you've got Dallas and Winnipeg at the top of the West, a big, like crunched up, Kraken, Kings, Oilers, Minnesota Wild. I can't remember the West or any conference, to be honest, being so wide open. Would you agree that this is, a huge opportunity for pretty much any team that's in it right now, because there hasn't been any clear team like the Boston Bruins on the other side of things establish themselves as the clear front runner?
Yeah, I think anybody's in it. It's going to come down to health. It's going to come down to consistency, and you have to give yourself an opportunity. You just mentioned a lot of teams. It'll be interesting for me to see what they do at the deadline to, for lack of better words, to double down, including the Winnipeg Jets. Chevy's got some room here. He's got some flexibility. He's been kind of sitting on, some cap money and been kind of stockpiling, some draft picks, some prospects. Is he going to go big game hunting? That's the $1 million question. I'm sure that's being asked every day in Winnipeg. I think Dallas is a really well structured team. They're well coached. They got great goaltending and star power. Edmonton, I'd never sleep on them with those two guys. And you add in RNH and Hyman that are having career seasons. Evander Kane coming back and being healthy once he gets through. He's had a personal leave here this week. So I don't sleep on Edmonton, but you're right. There's a laundry list of teams that you can make a case for them to go deep in the West. It's going to come down to your best players playing the best at the right time. And I would include the Winnipeg Jets in that conversation because they're certainly capable of it. And as you know, and I'm sure you've heard me talk a million times, I've always picked Winnipeg as a deep team and a team that could cause some trouble. But I've been disappointed in the outcome in the last couple of years, and we'll see if they could change that this year.
Well, it's a great segue into the deadline. That was sort of kind of where I was going. But considering the opportunity, let's just focus on the Winnipeg Jets, the opportunity that is there for this club this year, and the uncertainty of how the team's going to look a year or two from now. I think it is almost expected that Cheveldayoff is going to really put his best foot forward. When you look at the Winnipeg Jets, where would you start? Is it another top four defenseman? Is it a forward or two to help up front? We've heard the name Jonathan Taves quite a bit. He's intriguing for a number of reasons. I'm just interested in where you would start and what the targets would be if you were Kevin Cheveldayoff.
Well, how about both? You just mentioned it. You're looking at some uncertainty, we'll call it. Pierre-Luc Dubois' contract. Wheeler getting older, and Hellebuck having a career season, or at least an elite season. I always say, like, if you're a manager and you've got your top players playing at the top of their game for the most part, notwithstanding the last 10 days, this is where you should kind of be, I wouldn't say all in, but close to it based on, what you're looking at every night. So you said a top four defenseman. I don't know who that is. Everyone talks about Jacob Chychrun. There's a reason why, for me, this guy's been on the market for over a year. Why hasn't one of these teams pulled the trigger? I know the asking price is high, but to me, if a team's dying to have him in the lineup, you make that move. So what are we seeing, or what do we know behind the scenes that other managers aren't trusting? And up front, I think the Winnipeg Jets are as deep as anybody in the National Hockey League because Perfetti has proved that he's a player, and I think he's going to just continue to get better. Would I add to that group? Absolutely. I'm a big Adam Lowry fan, and I think you could put their top 7, and if you throw in a healthy Appleton, a top 8 against anybody in the league. But why not add another dimension that can play in that top 8 or top 7 or top 6? That just gives you the flexibility that if you do have an injury, you've got somebody else to plug and play. But I would say for me, I'd be looking top tier players. You mentioned Taves. I don't know if Bo Horvat or guys like that are a fit. But at the end of the day, Chevy has that flexibility. So I would be looking for a defenseman that can chew minutes and maybe be a little bit different dynamic than what you have already. And a forward that I just mentioned, you could plug and play at a minimum in the top 9, but maybe that can give you top 6 and a little different dynamic. So like I say, I don't think they need to do a lot of tinkering, but why not do the tinkering when you have that flexibility and you have a team that's played really well?
Overdrive's Jamie McLennan with us here on Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Timo Meier's a name that's come up quite a bit, and he's playing for the Sharks. We don't see a lot. They're certainly not ending up on national TV very often.
Yeah.
How impactful of an ad would Timo Meier be for any team, and would the juice be worth the squeeze?
Well, yes, on a couple different levels. But again, if you have that flexibility, because I believe he has to be qualified at quite a high number.
10 mil.
Yeah. So I thought somebody told me that it was a percentage of that. But either way, let's just say 10 or a large number. So you have control of the player. So it's probably going to be a king's ransom to trade for him. And there's either an extension involved or he's a rental with control moving forward that you turn over in the summer to another team. So just the price of it, let's throw that to the side. What you're getting is, I've watched them play and watched them play live a few times this year. He's a strong player. Like people forget, it's not the game isn't about fighting and being a physical intimidator. It's more about fighting for position on the ice. Can you skate? Can you win loose puck battles? Can you be strong on the puck? And I think that's what he's capable of doing. And he might bring a little bit different dynamic to some of the forwards, like a Nikolai Ehlers, who I love, but Ehlers is a speedster and he's a little bit lighter. Meier's a heavier player that can find the back of the net. So I think he's a fantastic fit for a lot of teams, and he should be garnering a king's ransom for San Jose just based on his control moving forward. But he would be a fit in Winnipeg if you could make it fit for the right price, we'll call it.
Jamie McLennan with us. Noodles, just before we go, I did want to ask you about the season that Josh Morrissey's having. I know that you've spoken about it on Overdrive in the past. Yeah. He's the Winnipeg Jets all-star representative. How did this happen? How impressed are you? And where does he, right now, with the way that he's playing, land among the hierarchy of the best defensemen in the league?
Got to be right there. I don't have a ranking for you, but if you're top 3 or top 5, he's in that conversation, hands down. How did this happen? I mean, putting it all together, a lot of it comes with health. It comes with being challenged, we'll call it, or at least giving a different mindset from Rick Bowness and understand. And Rick's, we've interviewed him several times, and I've had a conversation with him face to face and saying, scratching the surface or just asking the player to play to his potential. He's certainly done that. I think Josh is a really skilled guy, underrated speed, really good skater. So, working to position very quickly. There were times before where I thought his game, and this comes back to courage and drive, where he wasn't shy to take a hit to make a play. Now I think he skates out of it. He knows where to be on the ice and gives himself the best opportunity to advance the puck or jump into the play to create odd man rushes. So he's adapted his game into today's game, where I would argue that he had a little bit of old school in him that might have maybe hampered him from finding this level. I look at, and this hasn't been a change of scenery because he's been there the whole time, but I look at a guy like Hampus Lindholm that has been found money for the Boston Bruins. We all knew he was a really good defenseman, but he's found another level, that Norris type of level this year, by allowing himself to to use his skill, use his skating, use his puck handling. And I put Morrissey in that conversation as well, where, you're using the strengths of the player and not placing them in a situation where maybe, the weaknesses, and I'm not saying he's got any weaknesses, but it exposes some of the things where you don't want the player to be exposed to, and that's the physicality and maybe taking that pounding where you don't want that over an 82 game schedule. So I've loved his game. Obviously, the Jets fans watching him night in and night out have seen more, maybe a resurgence of him. I think we all knew it was there. He's just doing it consistently nightly now.
But he has just taken it to a whole nother level in the confidence that he's playing with, and it seems to grow throughout last night, notwithstanding, for the entire team.